Hello, everyone. This is a very short, just edit note for the podcast episode. Um, as you guys will notice, it's actually shorter than the other ones. That was never intentional. It was a brilliant episode, which is why I'm choosing to still release it because I think there was some very important topics that got talked about and discussed. But the issue, and I wanted to do this at the start instead of just doing a little text note. Um, it was done on Discord, and for some reason, my Discord and my OBS just don't get along. So I had to change around my microphone so that the guest could hear me on the call, and I was hoping it would potentially record through my desktop audio. It did not, and with that in mind, um, my microphone was never recorded. So if I was to trace out the entire podcast episode, it would have just been the guest talking and then periods of silence where it would have been me speaking. But because of the topics we discussed and because the insightful notions and knowledge of the guest Amelia, I've chosen to still release this, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I am. This is not how I wanted the podcast to return, but it also kind of adds into the notion as to why I dislike Discord as much as I do, because I tend to, when it comes to my audio and Discord, it's tended to only ever really be grief, whether it's been a technical fault or, to quote Hash, I apparently used to sound like Darth Vader on it. I don't know, but so yeah, the podcast is still very much back, and I wasn't going to throw away that call or that episode just because of a technical fault. So for this episode, this shorter episode, I have only I've there's still going to be the edits of the images and things, but for the actual audio itself, you will only hear the guest Amelia. You will not hear me. So it's going to be a bit of a different listening, but there was a lot of great topics discussed and a lot of great insightful wording and things. So please do enjoy.
Thank you. It's really nice to be on here. I write science fiction and fantasy. My goal is to revive the long form serialized fiction format, kind of similar to Charles Dickens or Isaac Asimov. And Kofi is a big part of that in trying to kind of revive that magazine or Pickwick Papers style format. Um, you can find a lot of my works on webstoryworld.com, which is again powered by Kofi. So I'm excited to be able to talk to you guys today kind of about what I've been seeing in the creative world, where we're seeing a lot of artists who are dealing with um, chronic illness, and how that really interplays with creativity, creative writing block, or just creative block in general. And how I've really seen a lot of people who are inspirational with how they are pushing through from different things, whether it's just having two jobs and still keeping up with their Ko-fi subscriptions and commissions, or that's having a chronic illness that makes it so they can't have a job at all, and they are sustaining themselves using Ko-fi or Patreon or other different platforms like that. and also talking about the serialized fiction format and how I think that that's really the new way that people are consuming content, whether that's on Wattpad or other short form content websites. And I think that what I think I've been talking with lots of people, and it's been really encouraging to find out that you know I would go through cycles of having like a lot of creativity and then no creativity. And I was always beat myself up about it because I would just be like, oh my gosh, I've got to produce more content. And I think it's this mindset that we have of being kind of content creation machines, and forgetting that we're people too, and that the social media algorithms don't have to dictate what we do, and being able I think that one of the really big benefits of like having a Kofi, having a community really is what Kofi kind of to me represents, um, allows you to be able to take a step back from the content algorithms and trying to constantly produce at a really high level that I think is unsustainable for people who maybe don't have chronic illness like migraines or brain fog. Uh, and gives you a chance to be able to focus on creating something that you care about. And I think that if you can focus on creating things that you care about that mean something to you, you're going to connect with an audience of people who share that life experience or can really relate with that. And I think it's really interesting to see and to talk with people about um, different things that they're going through in their life and how it affects their stories that they're writing, the art that they're creating. And I think that you see a lot of compassion um, from the audience. And then also, it really, I think, writing and art, music, all these different forms of creativity allows us to be able to kind of step into someone's shoes for, 5 minutes, an hour, and allows us to be able to experience compassion for where they're coming from and what they're experiencing in their life. Yeah, and I think chasing the numbers can really cause you to be really stressed, especially if you're an independent creator. I mean, I have like 20 people who somewhat regularly read my chapters. I'm really excited about that because I started with zero when I was publishing regularly, um, uh, like 2 years ago. And so even a small number is a success for me. And I think that at first I got really discouraged because I didn't feel like anybody was following along with what I was doing. Um, but then I realized as I was like picking up just a few readers, um, if I had 5 people that were sitting in a room listening to me tell a story, I'd be ecstatic. And I think that we've kind of gotten desensitized to uh, that reality with social media. If it doesn't go viral, if we don't get a million views, then it's not successful. Um, and I think that when it comes to when you're just starting out, you're as an independent creator, you have to be willing to celebrate the small milestones and treat those 20 readers as if they were 100 or 1,000 readers, and still produce that content that you care about, that you're passionate about, at that at the pace that is realistic for you. And you're going to find an audience that is okay with once a month updates, once a week updates, whatever you're able to produce consistently. Um, and you're going to find that audience. It's about consistency, and it's about reaching out to other creators and other people who have similar life experiences and being able to share your stories and your art with them. Yeah, I think that being able to have consistency is the key. I mean, it's the key to being able to manage chronic health issues or mental health issues. And so it makes sense that it's kind of, you have to incorporate that same mindset to whatever you're doing that is creative. And I think a lot of people tend to think of creative pursuits, writing or art, music, even cooking, kind of as a bonus. And I feel like for people that are creative, that are driven to write or to do art, it's an outlet, it's an expression of, and it's processing everything that's happening around us in the world. Um, and I feel like, you know, there's a tendency to, when we're not feeling good or when we don't feel like we've been doing a good enough job at maybe productive quote unquote work, or, as a freelancer, feeling like I haven't been able to get it accomplished enough, um, that we don't do creative things because we think, oh, I don't deserve it or I'm not up to it. But I think that even if you can do just a little bit every day, um, it's a lot easier than if you don't do any for a couple of months and then you have to try to get back into that habit of regularly processing, you know, your day, or regularly processing, life events that are going on, um, through creativity. And I think that having an output for that is really important. And I think I'm realizing that now more than ever after having gone on a hiatus, um, that it's it is important to have some sort of creative outlet for people who have that drive to. Yeah, that happens. I mean, I think that even traditionally published books, I've noticed that there is almost always some sort of error in around chapter 20. It's always been something that I find is funny, that it's always seems to be around chapter 20 to 25. Because I feel like the proofreaders at that point have gotten like they're like they're like starting to blur out a little bit. But yeah, there's definitely been things that I've gone back and, after it's been published in an anthology, maybe a year later, once I've gotten the rights back to it, I'll be rereading it, and I'm just like, oh, I think I missed, like I intended to describe this specific thing, or there was like a typo that that is a word that's just not the word that I meant. Um, and I think that that's what makes it human, though. And I think that that's what I think more than ever in this day and age, that's what's going to differentiate human writers from machine writers. Um, and so I think that, whereas before I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I think that now it's a little less embarrassing and it's a little bit more like humorous, I guess, and kind of take it on the chin if someone points it out, like your character's eye color changed in chapter 20. Um, and just realize that we're human, and that's actually something nowadays that we can celebrate, our little mistakes that just show that we're just regular people. Yeah, and I think that we're seeing a lot of the technology is emerging right now, and I think that there's a lot of ethical and moral questions about it. And I think that when it comes to generative AI, which is really fancy algorithms and machine learning, when it comes to generative AI art, I think that it's unquestionably stealing from other artists. I think when you're looking at generative, like, writing, it really is one of those things where, I mean, there's been so many controversies lately with that, where people are training their quote unquote AI on pirated books and things like that, that it's going to continue to get harder to tell the difference between human writing and um, AI writing. But I think that, like I said, it's those little imperfections that we that I would beat myself up for before, that are actually going to be the things that people are able to be like, oh, hey, this is actually a real person. And I think that there are ways to use emerging technologies for ethical uses, but I think that it really depends on the creator and their personal, like, how they're going to be able to use it. Taking something that they drew themselves and modifying it with AI, is that wrong? I don't know. That's, I think, really up to the creator and where they're coming from and where they're at. And, are they using it for a performance art? Are they using it to make a point? What I think it's really the intention behind the art, behind the writing, that determines um, whether you feel comfortable using that, whether it's to create an outline or to, write a summary. If you're comfortable uploading your content, then it's going to use it to create more content. And so it's like there's a lot of different perspectives on that, but I feel like one of the tricky things that I had happen is I had a regular contract for writing articles for a company, and they put it through an AI checker because it was like a couple years ago when that started coming up, and it kept flagging a lot of my content for AI creation, even though it was uniquely written, because the people who create the AIs, who fed the information to the AIs, write similarly to me because I write in a standard voice and format that is neutral so that it can be as a ghostwriter. Um, and so even though it was unique content, it still got flagged. And I think that we're going to see that there's going to be a point at which AI checkers and things like that aren't going to be able to tell the difference between AI writing and human writing. And I think that's where we get into some dangerous territory when it comes to freelancers, especially freelance copywriters. Um, and also when it comes to like search engines, whether they are going to prioritize or try to deprioritize AI written content. And if they can't tell the difference, it's it's kind of one of those things where they're creating a lot of these technologies without first asking, do we need it? Do we want it? How is it going to? I think that that's why it's important rather than to, like you said, rather than demonize, to try to have a conversation and try to educate as much as possible, because I think ultimately people have to choose what they're comfortable with. And if they can make an informed decision, I I feel better about that. As long as someone is making an informed decision, um, the technology is here. It's kind of like Jurassic Park. They didn't necessarily think whether they should do it, but the technology is here. The dinosaurs are here, and so we have to live in a world with the dinosaurs now. And so you have to kind of choose. Do you want to invite the dinosaurs in, or do you want to leave them outside? So one of the things that kind of getting back to what I was talking about with chronic illness and all of that is figuring out a way to be able to keep going when you're having a flare up. That's something that I am still struggling with, and I'm trying to implement kind of micro creativity habits, whether that's, uh, you know, reminding myself that journaling still counts as writing. It doesn't have to be writing, my main serialized story. It doesn't have to be writing a different short story. It can just be simply writing a one sentence summary of my day, or trying to doodle instead of trying to do a whole art piece. Um, and I think that if that's my hope is, and especially with talking with other creators, my hope is that that can help to be able to make it so that because when you're not feeling good, you don't necessarily feel like you have that creativity, but then you kind of get stuck in this cycle where if you don't create, it's also the world just doesn't seem as fun and bright and enjoyable for me at least. And so I think being able to still have a little small way to be able to remember the nice things. For me, I paint birds. I do watercolor on birds. And just maybe sitting outside and just sketching what I see instead of trying to sit down for 2 or 3 hours and actually just like complete a whole piece. Um, I'm hopeful that that sort of micro habits from what other creators have been, their advice that they've given me is going to help to um, slowly kind of get out of that creative block, especially as I'm coming out of a flare up and not trying to go back to writing 1,000 words a day. But I think it's been really interesting as I've been kind of taking a step back from my different stories and different things like that, and kind of analyzing them, because I've I've been writing seriously since I was 16, but only really started publishing things at like 25. Um, I'd have to look up the exact date, but uh, it's been interesting kind of taking a step back and looking at the different short stories that I've produced, the ones that I've published, and even the ones that I haven't, and some of the different stories that I have yet to write, and seeing kind of that connecting thread through all the different stories, and learning more about myself as a person, and like looking at my life experiences and seeing where, oh, okay, so this thread that I have of all of these characters who feel like they are not quite the same as everybody else. Not in a I'm the special elf princess way, which is fun, don't get me wrong. Um, but just in a maybe they have a chronic illness in the story. Maybe they have they like in one of my stories, everybody receives genetic modification to be able to control their abilities and powers. Except for my main character didn't receive those genetic alterations. And so even though they are the more natural form or the more original form, they see themselves and other people see them as less than. But it just requires additional training to be able to, and work and hard work to be able to get to that same level. And I think that I see that consistently through different stories. I really find it interesting to explore that space between different cultures. Um, like a lot of my stories have to do with two or more people that come together to save the world, um, that come from wildly different cultures, and wildly different life experiences, and seeing how you can have prejudices or different points of view that conflict, that may not even be a prejudice. It may just simply be that your life experience and someone else's life experience is so vastly different that you have completely different stances or different opinions on the same subject that aren't invalid, but you're going to have to bridge that gap. And I think that that's kind of the consistent key, is trying to bridge that gap between two different people and two different perspectives. Um, and it's been interesting just kind of seeing those threads, and it's a lot about trying to understand other people and trying to express a feeling of being in a world, but not and in a culture, but not feeling like I'm necessarily a part of that culture. And that, I think, looking back, stems from the fact that I am homeschooled. I was homeschooled, and I am super happy with my education and all my childhood experience and all of that. I had plenty of friends and lots of really great opportunities. Um, but as a result of that, I don't always relate with people who went through public school. Um, and I've always had that feeling of like being from almost like a different culture, while being surrounded by all of these people who have, their memes and their inside jokes and their different things that I don't, and their slang that I don't always understand. Um, and so I think that looking back, that really is kind of a core expression in my stories, is trying to understand other people and to have that empathy for people that are going through different things, and realizing that you're not, just because you have a specific perspective or life experience doesn't mean that that makes anybody else invalid necessarily. And also for the villains in the stories, sometimes there is a point where you can kind of point out and go, okay, yeah, yeah, some bad stuff happened, but not that isn't necessarily the best way to handle it. And I think that that's why it's so important to have community, to be honest, because I felt very like isolated when I didn't have people who had similar life experiences, and being able to talk with people and just be like, "Oh man, I'm having a bad brain day." I'm just like cannot seem to think through things. And then them being like, "Hey, did you drink enough water?" I'm like, "Ah, yes, bad brain day, forgot the water." Thank you. And just having that camaraderie and being able to have that support from other creators that kind of understand, I think makes a big difference in not feeling alone. And I think that we're not meant to be all separated out into little houses and little boxes and not go and see each other. And the internet, I think, really helps bridge that gap because um you might not live in an area where you have a bunch of people that you can regularly get together with at board game night at the community center. And so the internet, I think, really helps to bridge that gap, and being able to bring together people with similar life experiences, different life experiences, that can be able to help each other. Mhm. No, I absolutely agree. I think that um having these online spaces where you can be able to talk about like you said, even if it's that you're like, that's not how this affects my life, um but I can relate to where they're coming from. And so it can be empowering to be able to have a chance to express how maybe a chronic illness or a mental health issue has affected your life, and being able to say that in a community where people aren't going to be like extremely judgmental or not, or just be like, okay, but be able to, yeah, have that prejudice, and that they can be able to be like, oh man, that's really tough, or that really inspires me to do fill in the blank, and to be able to have that connection and be able to kind of process, because I think that a lot of times we get way in our head about stuff, and being able to have someone to talk to, or even just a group of people, even if you feel like you're just putting it out there in a Discord chat and nobody's paying attention, still the act of writing it down is kind of almost like an acceptance of it, and it can kind of help you to be able to process it, and so that it's not just a thought that's bouncing around in your head, getting, you know, bigger and bigger until it becomes something that you feel like you can't tackle or you don't know how to express. And I think that that's something for me that's been really helpful. um I have a really good support system um in real life as well, and so that is something that I really appreciate. um Even if they come, my friends and family don't necessarily understand or don't, you know, have the same chronic health issues, it is good to make sure that you have some people in your life that you can reach out to. Um, you know, this weekend I'm going to be doing some meal prepping because I'm having the hardest time with consistently getting those meals in, because uh it is I am not motivated, and I have a very restrictive diet that I have to be on right now. And so I was my friends were like, "Hey, you seem like you're struggling." I'm like, "Yeah." And so I asked if they'd be willing to come and help just prep some things, just like cut up some sweet potatoes and cook some meat. And I sometimes just having somebody that's there even while I'm doing it can make it a little bit easier to do, so that I actually feel motivated, because I'm an extrovert. I like it does. I think that it's, you know, there's different reasons for to be creative, like you said, like escapism, or whether it's an outlet, or it can be something that's a message. But I think that for me, creativity, it 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 changes. Most of the time, it was an escape, especially when I was younger. Being able to daydream and all of that, it was fun. Um, And I think that as I got older and as I, got a job and I was working, I think it became also a way to be able to process and to become more resilient in a way, into being able to take these different things that happen and um whether that's, a boss having a bad day or a customer getting upset at you or whatever it is that you're dealing with, or even just you had a chronic health flare up, being able to have a way of being able to process that so that it doesn't become something that drags you down, but that you can be able to be like, okay, this is something that I've worked through. And I think I've talked to writers who are like, this book that I'm writing is for me to be able to process my life experiences. I'm not going to publish it to anyone because it would traumatize them as I was traumatized. But it's helping me so much to be able to actually deal with this, and my therapist is helping me to be able to write this out. It's not even a like a biography or an autobiography or anything. It's just them being able to put these characters that are not themselves through it and then look at it through a different lens of, oh yeah, that was actually not okay. I get that now that this other person has gone through this thing that I went through. I can actually see this from an outside perspective. And I think that that's that's why that's I feel like why writing and art and all of this is um such an important human expression. And you like the book covers that I have. And I have a couple of pieces of art. The watercolor stuff is more fun than I feel like it's um good. But that might just be my own prejudices that I'm putting in um, on myself. Um, when it comes to the different stories that I've published, I tend to either write fairy tale or mythology retellings. I have King for a Minute, which is a King Arthur, specifically the Death of King Arthur retelling from the perspective of Mordred, but also in space. So that one is a fun short story that I've wrote. I have another one that is Meta and the Mediterranean Sea, and I'm not going to spoil what mythology that it is, what myth it is based off of. But it is a Greek myth, and it is urban fantasy, surreal, um, short story. And currently, my main story that I am working on is Shadows of the Ambassadorial Halls. Uh, and I wrote the first draft of this when I was 16. This is when I actually started taking writing seriously. And I have, some authors will write 3 books and put them in a drawer and be like, okay, those were my learning books. I have probably 10 different versions of this book that I wrote over the years. And I put those in a drawer. And I'm not publishing those versions, but this book that I am publishing as a serialized story, um, this is kind of the culmination of all of those years of work. Um, and it's set in a science fantasy world where you have 3 very different cultures. Um, one is the Elementi. They have elemental abilities that they are born with, but the main character was born without elemental abilities. Going back to what I was saying before, um, and her father is the ambassador, and if she doesn't marry by the end of 2 months, her dad loses her position, which might not be a big deal, except for the fact that he's in the middle of negotiating a war treaty with the neighboring country to prevent them from being conquered by an empire. So she has to navigate the complex political web and be able to secure this marriage to this guy who she doesn't really like. But he's the only option. Uh, so The other main character is her best friend from the other country that her dad is negotiating with, and that is Mineral. And they have uh, different powers based on power stones, and they are specifically things that modified them. So flight, telekinesis, um, strength, speed, that sort of thing. And Jaden did not receive the genetic modification that all the rest of his people did, so he is also kind of set aside, othered. Um, and so they kind of relate on that. But marriage between their countries is totally forbidden, so they've just always been friends. Jaden leads a double life. He's actually pretends he's kind of a Batman character in that he, by day he's the always late playboy son of the Lord Ambassador. Um, but secretly he's also a spy master who's leading a steam-powered secret society of former assassins and former spies as vigilantes for justice against his people's corrupt society. And he uncovers secrets that threaten the potential alliance between their countries. And if this alliance doesn't go through, the Empire is going to conquer them both. So he has to work with Sahara, and Jaden and Sahara have to work together to be able to stop this conspiracy that threatens to destroy everything that they're trying to build. And that's the main storyline. And there's one other storyline in this story. And the reason being is there's a character who I had in book 2, because I actually have written several drafts of multiple books in the series. And after reading it to book 2 to my family, and then going back and writing book 1, it's a long story. They wanted to know where Milo was, the character that was only in book 2. And so I ended up adding a whole nother plot line for Milo. And he is actually an exile from the empire that is trying to conquer everybody. And he goes on absolutely wacky adventures in the exiled Outlands, where he has to steal back a powerful artifact from the Bandit King, who is going to use this powerful artifact for evil to subjugate everyone. And he meets unlikely allies, a paladin who serves the guardian spirits of the Outland, and a supposedly gentleman bandit who really only cares for himself. So that is Shadows of the Ambassadorial Halls and kind of my main story universe. So if you're a fan of like Shadow and Bone, Babylon 5, Avatar: The Last Airbender, that's kind of my inspiration. Yes, political intrigue I think probably is, I think that with like political intrigue or with court intrigue, it's really fun because for me, one of my favorite parts is writing scenes where characters are having a conversation and what they're saying is one thing, but what they're meaning is a different thing, and both characters know that hidden meaning, and having that interplay between saying things like, I'll go check on them, meaning like, I'll go check on them. And but also having these different sides that have different perspectives, whether that perspective is wrong. In the case of the Empire in my story, the Animalian Empire that's trying to conquer everybody, they still have a very solid motivation for doing so. Their country is being turned into a desert, so they literally have to move and have to find a way to be able to feed all of their people. But the method, again, I think is the key for any villain that I write is cool motivation, still murder. Well, like, yeah, I think that it's a really, I think I agree when it comes to creating multi-dimensional villains. I think that that's honestly, like you were saying, back to Infinity War. I think that that's one of the reasons why it really succeeded. And again, in Sober, you have villains that you're like, I mean, I can kind of get where you're coming from, but I don't necessarily agree with how doing you're expressing that, how the end results. Like I was following you, bud, and then you got to the how what we're gonna do about it. Not following you anymore. Yeah, it's been fun talking with you. It's actually been really nice to be able to talk about these things that I've kind of had bouncing around in my head and thinking about. Start with writing short stories instead of trying to tackle an entire novel or novel series. um, you will be able to actually accomplish writing short stories, and you will be able to revise them quickly. And each short story is good, instead of having to write a chapter and then the next chapter is significantly better and having to go back and rewrite over and over again. If you can write a short story, you can revise it, you can edit it, you can put it out there, and then you can move on and it's done. And I think that if I had figured that out a decade ago, I would have been done with a lot more novels and a lot more short stories than I am now. And I think that that is, if as a teen or a young creator, if you can focus on novellas or short stories, depending on how verbose you are, um, instead of trying to tackle a full novel as your first project, it makes a significant difference because you can have that sense of accomplishment and you can be able to start getting feedback from people, and you don't have to feel like you have to consistently revise all of your short stories. They're done. You can move on. You can let them rest because nothing's ever going to be perfect. Like we talked about that just earlier. It can be done. Um, and that can be something that you can look back on and feel a sense of accomplishment. I didn't either. That's why I'm bringing it up. It took me years to figure out short stories and being able to just like sit down and be like, okay, I'm working on passive voice. I'm going to write 3 short stories, and by the end of this, I'm going to have mastered this. And it worked so much better for me. And I don't know if it'll work for everyone, but being able to tackle specific areas of writing where I was struggling and being able to get feedback from other writers that are more experienced than me and not having to give them a whole novel that is a whole commitment, but a 300, a 3,000 word short story, and then they're able to give a super short turnaround time and just show, here's the areas where you need to improve. I felt like I improved so much faster in a short span of time than um, the years and years spent revising the big long novel.
Thank you all for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed. And if you would like to see some similar content to this one, you can click there. Or if you would like to change around and have an explore of some of the other content, then you can check out the link below, which will be to a playlist. And if you would like to check out the content on other pages or socials, or if you would like to explore some of the other elements in detail, or pick up a book or whatever, or come and chat to me on Twitch when I'm alive, then down there. And as you can see, it has a list of what to expect on each of those platforms. And until next time, welcome to the Kingdom of Avalas, the world of Fellowmind books. Please do like, please do subscribe, and if you want to, pop out a comment.